Hello, hello.
Hey.
Welcome to another of our podcasts, Tea and Art. Here's the tea. We're going to bring the art in a moment.
Yes,
With,
back by popular demand. So we're going to continue on these videos.
So this is me, Daniel O'Reilly.
And me, Marianna O'Reilly. I was thinking whether I should be using my new name, which would be Magurudumyan-O'Reilly. So I suppose I should be using that. So
Go for
here
it.
I am.
Use it.
Marianna,
where does that come from?
Magurudumyan-O'Reilly. So O'Reilly is coming from him, and Magurudumyan is from my Armenian father. So here we go.
Okay, so this week, slightly different. I've been doing some drawing recently, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that in the context of writing. Obviously, the two things appear quite different, but they've always both been a part of my practice really solidly, and just want to talk about how they've been evolving in this latest iteration of the two things coinciding. And with you?
Well, yes, I've restarted my practice with doing drawings and works art on paper. So at the moment I'm looking into how I can integrate my stories, something quite personal and private, into the pieces I'm doing, because I want something to communicate to people, and I think maybe I'm being a little bit abstract about the thing. So I'm thinking about how I can use narrative on these in these pieces of graphic art and painting.
Interesting. Okay, so we'll start then.
Yes.
And as we go through, we'll flash images of the pictures we're talking about on the screen.
Yeah.
Which we'll edit in afterwards.
So you were talking about how you connect text to your visual images. So what comes first, and etc.
Well, in this case, obviously the writing has come first.
Are you doing them to any particular piece?
Well, I've been in the process since like about last January of writing these stories every 2 weeks for this one particular book, Lost Disparates, which are all drawn from 22 engravings by Goya, Francisco de Goya, and I've been writing stories based on the imagery. And as I'm coming towards the conclusion of the project, I'm considering the book that I'm going to publish at the end, which obviously I want to publish with the Goya pictures because the story and the engraving talk to one another in quite a complex way.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I didn't want to leave it at that. I really felt like I wanted to make some drawings. I'd made some test drawings before, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, which I wasn't really happy with. I made a couple of like pen and ink drawings where I was working directly from the Goya, and that didn't seem to work. But recently, you sort of encouraged like some drawing in the evening. So on Friday nights, we've been drawing in the evenings.
Drawing parties.
Yeah, getting quite involved in those. And as they've gone through, I've developed a new relationship with the stories, with the writing. Like the stories I write aren't pre-planned, kind of mapped out logical worlds. They tend to unfold almost just from the start of a sentence. I don't map it out and plan it out and think about how this part is going to relate with that part. No, it's like a phrase or the start of a sentence will appear, and then the whole rest of the thing will unravel like that. Like when you get a spool of thread and you unravel it and it just goes. That's how my brain works in this way. And with drawing, it's always been slightly similar. I've always drawn like my whole life, and most of my degree was drawing, and most of my MA was drawing as well. So I've always drawn a lot.
Text quite a lot
as well. And I've always tended to draw in a sort of warped domestic kind of fashion.
Yeah, it's like writing a magazine.
Yeah, because I've always been preoccupied with the concept of home or with family. And things have changed a little bit. Really, the drawings I've been making are they're like a visual impression of the stories that I've written. And because the stories are preoccupied with like shamanic frames of mind or visionary kind of mind states, the drawings reflect that. And I've got this funny thing where I feel like I'm at a point at the moment where I want my writing to look more like the way I make a drawing, and vice versa. There's always an image in my work of somebody frantically writing, and the writing has lost any sense and has become like a mark making, or almost like a drawing. So my writing tends to move more towards an image, and my images tend to move more back towards writing. So it's at a juncture like that. It's quite a delicate one, but I'm really enjoying that tension. And it's also a relief from continually thinking in like in words, to think in only the ways you really get to think when you're making a drawing. When you're actually working with a line, or the quality of the pencil, or how blunt it is, and with colour and all sorts of other considerations. It's a different frame of mind, but somehow I'd like my writing to congeal more like that, with those sorts of considerations, like tension between space and non-space, or line and what have you.
Almost quite abstracted kind of.
Can you relate to that? Because you've always had a particular relation with abstraction.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, because that's a completely different set of almost not rules, but like secret machinery. For me, abstraction is like kind of secret machinery, and I suppose in text you also find that machinery. Like, when do you know when a piece of text is finished? I suppose when it starts kind of working by itself, isn't it? It's like you write almost quite an abstract way from the subject matter, i.e. Goya's drawings. You're working from that, and by abstracting, say, small detail of that drawing, you come into a completely different realm where you have to rebuild the whole landscape in a sense. So I think that's what happens with writing. For me, in your writing specifically, because it's quite visual for me personally, I can kind of see that, the abstracted way of thinking, or connecting things, or editing things, or even how the image develops. Yes, it's like very, very familiar.
It's almost like we're talking about the mechanics of these two disciplines rather than the actual content at all.
Well, how would you deal with content? What's the actual narrative within the piece? Do you see it as complete abstraction, or do you still see it as a narrative piece? Can you tell me, say, in a drawing, well, this object, like the object you did with the bowl, like with the white bowl, what would that referring to? Or how did that start?
Well, I think they are a bit like process orientated, because the content follows from out of that, because the process of making those is kind of like allowing a line to wander of its own accord, or allow forms to interrelate across a space that seem abstract, but actually there's a dialogue starts to form between them, and then you go further into that dialogue.
So that's when they congeal. Is that what you mean? Like when that's sort of congealing in this image, which can be, almost like an abstract expression, perhaps.
Yeah.
But there is a weight to them as well, so they are quite physical, I'd say.
But I think even if they're abstract, you still look at them, and the eye is continually looking to form patterns, right? It's always looking to break down the thing it's looking at. Always.
Well, it would probably even do with writing.
So, I don't know. I'd say they're abstract, but they're not really. They are concrete forms that one can understand. There is space. There is growth, development of things, and weight, and these kinds of things. So I suppose kind of like with the stories, even though it seems like there are familiar handles that you can latch onto, the overall world, the logic of which dictates the story, is Yeah, it's more like one of those drawings. And there is weight and there's line, there's character and there is context and there is grammar, and these things hold together, but in a scheme that's almost taking place in another realm, perhaps in a sort of in a dream world or a private hallucination.
With a different set of operations or like ideas, I suppose.
Because I'd say if there was one thing I was completely preoccupied overarchingly with writing or with drawing or howsoever, is creating worlds. I very much work from this idea of the monad that we come across a lot in Deleuze. So there's an interiority in each one of us, which is like an infinite interiority. Like how in maths you come across the idea that actually there are many, many infinities and not just one, and that completely contradicts the whole logic of number, but it doesn't. And we have a similar thing where we have a common shared reality we all seem to understand, and we have an ego which we all seem to understand, and we recognize other people and we all seem to understand. But that is completely fallacious. We don't really understand very much. I just see more of consciousness like a rude grasping. It doesn't understand very much, even though it's highly intelligent.
So it just wants to survive whatever kind of
like we think we can
new
see
growth you have. You can sort of temper it, and you can kind of let it
maybe we deceive ourselves. We deceive ourselves. We can see into the reality of other people.
Yeah, because we're simplifying.
We absolutely cannot know what other people are thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
But we fool ourselves into thinking we understand that, because we've already fooled ourselves into thinking we understand ourselves. So there's a lot of, and obviously the whole point of Goya's late engravings, they're called follies, aren't they? It's, we don't even really use the word folly anymore, but it means like foolishness. It's like human condition, right? And that would be a prime condition, is that to deceive others, you need to deceive yourself first.
The absurdity.
Yeah, or like the sheer ignorance of knowledge. We can take a piece of knowledge as though it's a final understanding of something, so as to make our lives easier.
Yeah, because
rather than stay fluid and understand that our knowledge of things is always shifting, and there's no permanent ground upon which it really stands.
Yeah, that was full on. Well, I'll have a go. So at the moment, I'm just thinking about this piece, which I might be able to show here in Spain. I'm looking for exhibitions at the moment where I can sort of show my work. So it's on gender violence. I think it's organized by some group of feminists from Catalonia or something. So, well, anyway, so I'm making kind of quite a narrative piece for me. I'm trying to. We have been talking quite a lot about like demons, and in my work, people have noted that there is a lot of kind of quite a lot of horror in my drawings. And I feel, because when I draw, I try to kind of just relax into it and see whatever is going to come out. I'm not really, I'm letting it lead me. So far it's led me into kind of quite dark places, there's lots of images of skulls and, like horrible kind of beings in it. So I'm working with that at the moment. So this piece about gender violence is like basically the continuation of trying to work with my own demons, so my own story. Like, how can I make my own story much more relatable to people, or something that people can understand. Maybe, my personal story. I believe that's my personal story is my art, right? So at the moment I'm kind of working. So I'm working with this trauma that I've experienced, gender violence, or kind of themed, and so I'm using mixed media. I'm embroidering the actual story, the letters and the words, embroidering with this piece of fabric, and it's going to have like kind of like a few stories actually thematically arranged, or I'm thinking maybe even like a genealogy, so there's like the movement of this trauma, kind of sexual traumas, in my personal narrative. So I'm thinking of it more like a scroll. So it will have a few stories that influenced me in my life. And yeah, so I'm working on that at the moment, as well as also facing weekend demons and trying to see how I can actually communicate better, communicate more clearly through my art pieces and through my projects. So that's
do you think it's a question of communicating better or of communicating in your own way?
Well, it's that and
I suppose
that.
is better,
It's
isn't
both.
it?
It's both. It's always both. I'm trying to communicate this to myself in a better way, and the way I feel with the stories, perhaps they don't need to be held in anymore. They kind of want to come out. So I do want to communicate. It's a particular thing that I want to communicate.
You feel you want to have a better relationship with yourself?
Yeah, I want these stories to kind of,
the path to having better relationships with others is through having a better relationship with yourself.
Yeah, and well, it's communicating. It's obviously it's like making a hole into a kind of interiority.
Isn't that
it's making thing reflect and thing to come out and thing to be kind of left behind. I suppose it's like talking about stories or histories. Something that is left behind. So I feel at the moment for me to completely kind of to come in terms with something, I need to make a crack into the light. So I'm making this crack through writing out this narrative, which is quite important to me. So that's what I'm doing.
Quite interesting. Your drawing is moving more towards writing. My writing is moving more towards drawing. And there's definitely another corollary where I said that to deceive other people, you first need to deceive yourself. But your practice has been by forming a better relationship with yourself, you can then form a better relationship with others.
Yeah, to make a special, like a crack into yourself, to understand, to get to move into yourself. That would mean, I think, better kind of communication either way, like in and out. Make a bit of a connection from internal into external, and then reflect back onto yourself. I think that's kind of is quite important for me at the moment to do. So art is a little bit of therapy. It can be therapy. It can be also other things. But at the moment, I'm dealing sort of with that.
Something I wanted to bring up was that there is obviously a duality in the way that we work. We've always worked quite closely. And I mean closely, not in the sense like we consciously decide on how we're going to be working, but more often than not, it's like there's a set of pistons or cogs going. You and I.
Oh, firing up! Yeah, constantly firing up.
And
yeah.
we are working in a relationship, but it's not necessarily explicit. It's like a way in which we sort of interleave from time to time in our practice.
Yeah.
And that thing becomes.
Because I'm very much affected by your writing as well. So your writing informs my story, right? So yeah, so that's really important. And I also try to think more in terms of writing as well, how writing can be as creative and as kind of like boundary breaking as, I suppose, as art. So yeah, so I think we definitely have communicated on quite a lot of levels like that, and between our practices, even if you don't acknowledge it, you're surrounded by it, so therefore you are affected by it, and you are, you become part of it, and it becomes part of you. So it's something, I think it's definitely great, because I think there is energy being produced by this firing of kind of interests in these directions that always kind of work.
And I suppose it's always been important that you aren't what you think you are what you do.
Exactly.
And this particular type of doing that we've come around to is obviously an effort to create ourselves. A lot of frustration and misery comes from imagining yourself a particular way
Yeah, exactly, because we're always changing, but we are trying to hold on to this personality that we think we have, but this personality is formed by actions, right? So you can't be just a personality and your actions don't correlate. It's all coming together. It's all
so I suppose this process
kind of
of like
influencing each other.
continually showing what we are in the process of becoming guides the act of becoming as well. It's like there's a form of communication there, but also of creating something, and part of what we're creating is ourselves.
Yeah, it's basically opening a window onto yourself to see, I suppose, more of the world somehow. Yeah, personal into collective and back.
Yeah,
isn't it a bit like that? So there's always an exchange, before private and public.
Because a person's not an island, but at the same time, a person is not the collective consciousness either. There's always a ambiguous back and forth between the two, of being like a private, individual, singular organism and part of a social organism. And there's no clear line where that begins and ends, where a private act becomes something that influences the political sphere and vice versa. It's really, you couldn't work out where that is. There's a we do form part of a larger organism, whilst at the same time maintaining an absolutely impenetrable interiority.
Yeah.
Try and work your head around that.
It's the awareness of that, the awareness of that you're not on your own,
but that you entirely are as well.
And you entirely are at the same time. So how do you juggle those two? So shall we end on this note?
Yeah.
This week.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed this. We'll be back for some more coming up to the New Year period. So if you've got any comments or there anything you'd like to ask us that you want us to cover in any of these, please hit us up, drop us a comment. We're happy to talk.
Okay.
Yeah, splendid. See you next time.
Bye for now.
Bye.